My name's Martin Tugwell. This year I'm the president of CIHT, and I just wanted to kind of give you a bit of a reflection about my presidential theme, some of the context within which it's set, and also to talk a little bit about what we're doing as an institution in leading some of the big challenges facing us as an industry, particularly the climate change agenda. And I kind of want to start off by saying, do you know what, it's really interesting times. I've been involved in the industry for 30 years, and then throughout that entire period, I've been really struck by the fact that it's a profession and an industry which is almost limitless in terms of its ambition, and yet we still have some tremendously untapped potential. What I've always found, though, is right throughout that career is that connectivity, being able to connect people and places with opportunities and services. That connectivity is at the heart, which makes, for me, transport and transport planning a really exciting agenda to be moving forward. Which is kind of what took me to take Shaping Tomorrow Today as my theme. I wanted to get across that whether you're maintaining the existing asset, whether you're building a new piece of infrastructure, or whether you're thinking and planning about the future shape of the transport system, each and every one of us is having an impact on the future. Each and every one of us is helping genuinely shape tomorrow today. And I think that's where, as a profession, we need to be building on our strengths. My reflection when I did this presentation, or a variation of it earlier in the year on my inauguration, I was reflecting on the fact it's also 30 years since I've been involved with the institution. And at the time I was trying to get across that I did have a life outside of the transport profession with interests around motor racing and music, amongst other things. I do admit occasionally to having set up a society which owns a diesel locomotive or two, such as my passion for transport. The point I wanted to get across throughout was, though, on my personal journey, whether it's been as a transport modeler, whether it's been as an engineer working on roads or bridges or delivering on the ground, it's the ability of the individual to make a difference. It's the ability of the individual to shape tomorrow today, which has actually been driven in terms of my professional career. And throughout that, I've been struck by the people I've worked with, the strategic leadership that's provided by politicians and senior professionals within the industry. It's a really powerful and very exciting industry in which to work. It's also an industry in which there's a tremendous amount of change. The pace of change never seems to ease up, but we often forget that the driver for change comes from the business community. If we think about some of the great transitions from horse and cart to canals, canals to railways, railways to roads, and beyond that to into the ICT, a lot of the driver has come from businesses doing things differently. The railways were created not because of as a way of transporting people, but because it was addressing a business need. It transported coal from the collieries to the factories. So we need to think about how some of this pace and change is being driven by businesses and the services we access. And it is understanding it comes from ourselves, the choices we make in terms of moving forward. Now, those of you who've known me and worked with me will know that I'm not necessarily one to abide by the exam question. And when I was going back over my school reports, I came across this quote which talked about how I'd had a good year, but I'd have even a better one if I actually answered the question that was set, rather than that was one that was then I thought should have been set. And I think that's kind of summed up my approach again throughout my career. Challenge received wisdoms. If somebody says you can't or you shouldn't do stuff, what is it we're trying to achieve? What is the outcome we're trying to achieve? How do we actually make a difference? I do like to just make the observation that my curiosity can get me into trouble sometimes. I recall an occasion once where I was refereeing a local volleyball match. It was a match in a local league, and it was located in one of the local prisons. For some reason, that team did all their matches at home. And I was waiting for the teams to come onto the court, and I could see this very big green button. And I thought, that's interesting. I wonder what that does. So being a curious person, I pressed it. And it turned out to be the panic alarm that if one of the prisoners was attacking a prison officer, it automatically shut down the entire prison. So cue lots of laughter amongst the inmates of the prison and lots of anxious running around by the prison warders. So my curiosity can get me into trouble. I think I'm just pleased that I didn't try the button in one of the Devonport dockyard buildings which said danger nuclear attack, because you never know when it's quite connected to number 10 Downing Street yet. The point of all of this is challenge received wisdom, the power of the leadership of individuals within our profession, the power of the CIHT providing strategic leadership is all about shaping tomorrow today. And if I think about some of the key issues facing us as a profession, there are many challenges. But if I had to think about where was my focus would be at the moment, it is around investment, it's around diversity and inclusion, and it's about vision-led. If we think about investment, we know investing in infrastructure and services makes a difference. If we're going to support and enable communities to realise their potential, if we're going to enable the economy to realise their potential, we need to invest in infrastructure and services. And we know as a country, we don't invest enough. We know that we could do more if we're going to be competitive with our global competitors. So as we look to the spending review next year, we need to be making the case as to why investment in infrastructure and services is really important and why changing the way we do investment is really key. As an institution, and Matthew led that, my predecessor as president, a review of local highway infrastructure and funding for highways, making the case as to why investing for 5-year cycles in local roads and maintenance makes a difference in terms of what we can achieve, both in terms of the quality and the output. Diversity and inclusion, we need to do more as a profession to get that diverse and inclusive approach to the way we work. If we haven't got that diversity and inclusion, we're not going to get the breadth and the perspective that actually reflects everyday reality. We focus too often on the travel to work, but actually the travel patterns we have on a daily basis, 7 days a week, are much more complex. As an institution, we've really emphasised the importance of tackling the diversity and inclusion agenda, and it's really quite satisfying to see how over the years that focus has meant that as an institution, we now have something like 27 or 28% of our membership are female, against an industry average of around 10 to 12%. So much better than the industry average, but still much more that we can do, which is why it was so pleasing to hear and see earlier in the year that in terms of our new members, we're now much closer to 50-50 in terms of diversity and inclusion. It makes a difference in the way we do our business. It makes a difference in the solutions that we think and take forward. And if you've got that diversity and inclusion, if you've got that investment opportunity, you can really drive forward a vision-led approach. You can think and understand where do we want to be as a society, as a community, and what role do we want the transport system to play in enabling that to happen. Think about the outcome. Think about then how we use the ability to shape the solutions to deliver on that outcome. Because the challenges we face means that this isn't business as usual. I live in Oxford. I was really quite surprised when I was reading my Sunday Times over breakfast one morning, and it came up, this diagram came up showing that even in Oxford, compared with the end of the 20th century, the average temperature is already 1.6 degrees higher. So when we're having that conversation about the impact of climate change, and we talk about 2-degree changes and more, we have to take a step back and say, actually, this is happening now. It's not an academic conversation. And what we can do as an institution is think about how we can shape that and take some leadership moving forward, which we've done many a time. 2 or 3 years ago, we had a piece of work which came under the snappy title of Futures. I have to always spell it out because I can never remember quite what that acronym means. The point here, though, is that this is about shaping the future. Shaping tomorrow today by thinking about what kind of vision do we have, what kind of communities are we looking for, and then thinking about how we use our ability as leaders to take to make that deliver. There's a new paradigm coming. Some people talk about it being decide and provide, others talking about vision and validate. The point of it, it's vision-led, outcome-focused, and using our professional skills to shape the agenda moving forward. And it's using our ability to look across agendas. So yes, our focus is on transport and strategy, but actually we need to understand what's happening in the government's industrial strategy. If you look at the national strategy, 4 drivers of change, catalysts for change, future of mobility, data and artificial intelligence, an aging population, and clean technology. These are drivers of new businesses. They are also partly the solution to some of the challenges we face as a transport system and a transport profession. So reaching out as a profession, providing that leadership to work with other sectors will enable us to actually make a difference. When I kind of reflect then on my journey as a professional over 30 years, and this is a picture of where I come from, which is Devon, I had a wonderful opportunity as Devon when I was a transport modeller to start understanding how you shape the future. I was very lucky to then work within an engineering profession to get that understanding of how it applies at a practical level. And I find myself now working as a subnational transport body, England's economic heartland, where again we're using new techniques, new types of modelling, agent-based, activity-based modelling to understand how we can shape the future moving forward. Now, I mentioned about vision into reality, and I'm a great believer of the power of vision. I was very lucky 7 years ago now to be part of the cast for the opening ceremony for the 2012 Games, and I particularly remember one wet Sunday. If you remember 2012, the Games themselves, they were quite very sunny, quite dry actually, in fact, but the run-up to the Games was one of the wettest springs we ever had, and we got really, really wet in the rehearsals. But there was one particular Sunday where we were in the stadium and we couldn't rehearse. And Danny Boyle stood up and for 15 minutes talked to 1,000 amateur volunteers about what his vision for the sequence that we were going to run. We were the sequence that transformed the green and pleasant lands into the industrial landscape. And he understood and he explained what was his thinking behind that. And in those 15 minutes, he brought 1,000 people together to deliver one of the most awesome and frankly exciting pieces of the opening ceremony. So I don't underestimate the power of vision-led, outcome-focused, and using professional leadership to shape tomorrow today. Because we do need a new conversation. We need to have a conversation which focuses on our choices, engages the wider community on the consequences, and then provides the leadership to deliver it. Which is why, as an institution, we've been taking, over the last 3 or 4 months, a very positive and very proactive step to rise to the climate change challenge. If I step back into my day job, we've recently completed a consultation on the outline transport strategy for England's economic heartland. The climate change emergency has come through consistently right across the board as being one of the most important issues, whether you're a local authority, whether you're a business, whether you're a community. So it's there. It's one of the most powerful drivers in people's minds at the moment. And we need to step up and we need to provide the leadership to actually deliver it. And this again is where that more diverse and inclusive membership actually helps us, because that breadth and that diversity allows us to understand the perspectives that we need to take forward. We've got commitments at a UK level to achieving net zero greenhouse gas at 2050, 2045 in Scotland, but we need to start asking ourselves whether it is actually ambitious enough. We need to think about whether we can wait the time it might take to achieve that by those targets. Which is why in the summer we published our Pledge for Change, a statement of intent on behalf of the institution that we will step up and provide leadership on this issue. We will work with our membership and our corporate partners to make sure that we are adding and taking forward the need for change. It steps forward in really 6 simple steps at the start to start with. We need to promote the need to plan and mitigate for the consequences of climate change. Discussing the origins and the cause and effect is interesting. What we know as professionals is we see our transport systems being impacted on by extreme weather events on a more regular occurrence. The impact that we have is more severe. So planning for and dealing with that mitigation is really important, and starting from it now. Goes back to the point I made earlier. We need to make the case for investment. It's the importance of that case for making investment in local highway network. You need that investment to be able to plan for and deliver the mitigation. We need to promote the need for investment and implementation of that mitigation, and using our approach to development by using our experience and the understanding within our membership to drive change in both the technical and policy work. Earlier this year, we published Better Planning, Better Transport, Better Places as a key way of changing the conversation. So we focus on the outcomes. We focus on how we develop and deliver communities rather than simply investment in infrastructure. And that's where, as the institution, through its role as a learned society, as a chartered body, can celebrate and then disseminate best practice that shows how we can, as a profession, respond to this challenge. Indeed, our National Transport Awards, which will be open for nominations early in the new year, is an example of where we can celebrate and then disseminate the very best of good practice that's happening now and being planned for delivery. We need to think about how we do that more regularly and how we do it further. We have a network of regions and devolved partners, and we're using those to make sure that the information, the knowledge that we have can be disseminated and shared, so we build that momentum and actually make a difference. And of course, it's important to make sure that we see the next generation of professionals coming through and reflecting the need to take this as an issue when they're working on their career development, which is why we'll look to see how we can incorporate it in those opportunities and those offers we have to our members at whatever stage in their development. And of course, you can't stand up and say, this is what we're going to do as a profession, without also talking about the fact that we need to make a start as an institution ourselves, which is why, as an institution, as a business, we've made a number of changes about the way we do our work to make sure we do our own contribution to reducing carbon footprint, even to the extent where we're starting to make an offset for carbon footprints where we have no choice, but the form of travel does incur that cost. It's the start of a conversation. We're committed to taking this forward as a pledge for change. We're committed to making sure that our role as leaders within the profession allows us to draw on the wealth of knowledge and experience from our membership, from our corporate partners, and from our partners in both the public sector and the research sector as well. But at the end of the day, we need to think about how we can make a difference ourselves. It's no good as a profession standing there and asking for others to make their choices if they're not the choices we'll make ourselves. It's one of the things that I feel most passionately about, and it's one of the things I'm really proud that, as the theme of Shaping Tomorrow today, we are stepping up and responding to that challenge. We're providing the leadership, and we're looking to work further with our members and beyond that in actually delivering this as an objective. I hope that gives you a sense of what drives me in terms of my theme of Shaping Tomorrow today. I hope it gives you a sense of some of the opportunities and the challenges that the CIHT is responding to. And I also hope, if you're not a member, that you'll join us, and you'll join us on that conversation, and you'll become not just the advocates of change, but actually the agents of delivering that change. Thank you very much.